All right, all right, all right. Good morning, everybody. You may notice that Lebang is also at home this morning, and we've got no power at the studio. And for all those people who've been full of shit in the comments, go fuck yourselves. No, I mean, like, seriously, you don't subscribe. You don't pay a subscription for this show. We don't ask you to pay. We don't ever ask you to start a Patreon or any of that shit. And when I see some of these comments, I'm like, you know what? Actually, why don't we just not do the show this morning? Because we don't have power at the studio. Why don't we switch it off? And let's see what everybody does for entertainment. You go, why don't we watch SABC? How about that? You guys can do that, and then we'll see how it goes for the next hour or two. Fucking people complaining here about, if it isn't on by 6:05. Like, really? I owe you something, do I?
Yeah, nah.
My day
Be
like
like
this.
that.
Ryan messages me at 5:00 this morning to say he's just got to the studio and there's no power at all. There's nothing going on.
Same.
So I'm like, okay, so what are we going to do? So people can only watch on YouTube. They can't listen live on the app because the app won't allow us without the studio being online to connect. So I'm like, well, we got to figure out a way. We warn people on social media and all this shit. So we've been dealing with this for an hour. Anyway, we're here now. We're live. Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, Lebang. How are you?
Good morning, Gareth. I'm well, and how are you?
Good. Good. I am actually very good. I am, I have some power, which is a start. I mean,
That's nice.
You consider yourself lucky if you've got that these days.
Dude, what a time to be alive. We're like, oh, the lights are on. Hallelujah. Like, we're being grateful for things that we should generally just be getting. Yeah, that's the time that we live in.
Right. I mean, this is the stupidity. And I think of like Cyril play acting at pretending to be a president. And I think of like these social media posts I see from people like Fikine Mbalula. Oh, we're having a national working committee meeting, and they'll get there in their ANC t-shirts like a bunch of clowns. And what are you really? What are you governing over, you fucking idiots? Like, what are you sitting there doing? You're governing over the destruction of a country. That's what you're doing. You're like guys who are rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but you're wearing the captain's hat and you're pretending to be like important. And not one person, not one person in South Africa has any respect for you unless they are suckling from the government teat, which, by the way, is running dry and sour.
As well.
So, over yourselves, you idiots. Anyway, I got lots of things to talk about. We got plenty of really, really interesting people coming on this morning. We've got, among other things, JJ Cornish, who will be joining us. So I'm excited to see and hear him again. He's always good to talk to. Have you noticed an uptick in like spam?
Where exactly? Like,
well,
what, on your phone, via email, or what?
Email, on Instagram, everywhere. It just seems there's a lot going around at the moment.
I don't stick around long enough. Like, I pick up my phone, I just do what I need to do, and then I put it down again. I don't hang around there, especially when I can see that, okay, these are foreign people calling, or Truecaller tells me, oh, blah, 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 debt companies calling, or whatever the case. I'm just like, yawn, reject the call. Don't open that email. Right. It's a lot of invasion of privacy.
I get
lately. I don't know what the purpose of the Poppy Act was.
Yeah, well, exactly. The whole point. So they had this Poppy Act to like protect our personal information. Meanwhile, we're on every call list in the country. How do these insurance companies manage to get all of our information if we're on the Poppy Act and everybody's information is protected? Like, surely it is time that, again, someone enforce the rules somewhere and some people go to jail for like using these call lists that are not meant to be available. Or a government also panhandling on street corners with like digital versions of everybody's phone number and name so that these randoms can call us all day. I mean, I want to know how this happens. But
it's absolutely scary.
I get those from like Truecaller, and then it tells me this is spam. And usually I just put it away. And yesterday there was one who called while we were sitting. We just finished a meeting, and I answered it, and I was like, hello? And this woman's like, and I was like, I can't hear you. She goes, so I go, I don't know what I have no idea what you're talking about. She goes, so I go, all right, I just calmly, I reach for the drop the call button. I felt so good about that. It was like a bit of therapy. I felt decent.
Like, what's sad is they just doing their job. Like, these people are just doing their job. Them get into the office at like 4 a.m. and they've got like quotas. Within an hour, you need to have called 10 people, 20 people. So for them, it's just work. For us, we're on the receiving end of their jobs. And it's just like freaking frustrating. Being called at 7 a.m. on a Monday. I remember that gym activation you took out 10 years ago. Yeah, I need to start paying it when you, and then you're like 7 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. And for them, that's like normal working hours.
Yeah. Look, I never blame the people in the call centers. It isn't them. I agree with you. But these people who are selling our numbers, they need to be brought to book. There is already a law, for God's sake. If your law isn't enforceable, it is not worth the paper it's written on, right?
Facts.
Anyway,
it's a lot.
So
yeah, they just sell data.
Well, they'll sell it to the highest bidder. These guys are not not loyal to anybody. It's wherever it goes. And funnily enough, I saw like the Vodacom CEO on TV last night. I watched a bit of TV news last night. Aren't you proud of me?
Wow.
And I
you watched TV?
Yes, Vodacom. So the Vodacom
Your
CEO
poor
on
dusty television, wondering what's going on.
I know, and I've got to say, like Shamil Jusub from Vodacom is starting to look like an old lesbian. I mean, I haven't seen the guy in a business meeting for ages, but he looks like he's taking massive strain. He says mostly because of load shedding, they've had a loss. They've made a loss of some $6 billion, 6 billion rand or something. Could that be correct? Double check
That's
that,
a
because
lot.
I don't want to be lying about this, but I mean, I really felt sorry for him for a second, and then I thought, no, hang on, wait a second. There's no reason to feel sorry for him, because Vodacom have made so much money over the years that actually it would be absolutely fine if they don't do so well. Vodacom reports a 6.4% drop in full year profit. That was how much. So,
but like, if you had the actual amount, it's probably like it's not gonna hurt them in any way. You guys are making so much money already, and the CEO, I think he's fine, technically.
Yeah, no, but I mean, obviously, but you see, we've got to stop thinking like this, because this is not going to help anybody. I mean, it's like those people who have a generator or solar or inverter. It's like those people going, oh, well, I don't care how bad it gets for everyone else. The reality is, though, you can't operate businesses. You can't operate traffic lights. You can't operate basic infrastructure. So eventually it does affect everybody. And it's fine for us to say, oh, well, I've made a plan for this and I've made a plan for that. And I know you have, and I know I have, and I know lots of our listeners have, but we're still part of this country. So when these things don't work, and when big corporations start feeling the pinch, because, I was talking to someone the other day about the hospitals, and when they do go offline, they have to spend so much money on diesel to keep all that machinery going that it is just unbelievable. I mean, like, I don't know how any of them manage to run at all, because the diesel cost is now like a bigger line item cost than almost anything except staff. And you think about that, and it's just, that is not part of what they budget for, So it's very, very scary.
No, everybody's struggling, especially the businesses, whether big or small. Everybody's obviously feeling the heat. Who was I was having a conversation with someone, I think it was last year before I left, about the hospital, how bad they really, really are. If there is a generator at the hospital and it runs out of diesel or petrol or whatever, then everything stops. Nobody goes to refill. Nobody calls anybody to refill. It's done for the day. They close, and the nurses go home. There's nothing that they do, and also nobody's trying to take responsibility to even do something. In Tembisa, it's gotten that bad. Like, once the generator's down, there's like nobody comes to save them. Nobody does anything. So
that
really,
means
that's just, it made me
that
realize,
means
yeah,
people
no,
die, right? That means that people die.
100%.
That's all there is to it.
100%. It's bad, guys.
God,
Go bad.
that is absolutely horrific.
Mm.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and moan all morning, because we do actually have things to do, and we have some interesting people joining us a little bit later on, including, I'm very, very happy to say, somebody called Dr. Ronwyn Van Eeden, who's a medical oncologist. Now, we've had a lot of people asking about cancer on the show for various reasons over the years. Lots of people saying, well, how does this work? What kind of treatment is the best? What do we have to do? What is the most appropriate thing to know? And there's so many questions, and really, this is one of those diseases that affects all of us, right? We really are all just kind of in the firing line, and we still haven't developed any surefire way to beat cancer. But there is good news on the cancer front, and that's why I wanted to get Dr. Ronwyn on. So we're going to talk to her about immunity, chemotherapy, clinical trials, all of that shit, because it's something you've got to think about. And there isn't anyone I know who has never had any cancer to deal with in their lives. So we've got to all be aware of this. And I thought, let's get the expert on. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about this morning, and this this was on the news that I was watching yesterday. Most bizarre thing ever, right? They show this policeman who is, the guy is drunk as hell, and he's driven into a woman on a bike. Have you seen this clip?
No.
Oh my God. All right. So I'm going to play a little bit of it. It goes on for, I don't know, a minute. But you've got to see this thing to believe it. First of all, this cop is so paralytic. He's stumbling around. He doesn't even know where he is, but he was driving a police vehicle, and he smashed into this poor woman on a bike. You can see that she cares about this bike. The little pink stickers on it and everything else. And I'm really, really, first of all, I'm sad for her. I don't know how badly she's injured or whether she's even alive, because that's how it looks, right? It looks pretty bad. She's just lying there. And this guy is like, he's gone. He's like, not even, I mean, I've seen drunk people, all right? I've been around a lot of drunk people. This is next level drunk. You actually have to see it to believe it. So watch this quickly. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see what I mean. If you're not, I'll try and explain it to you afterwards in Lebang as well. But just watch this idiot. Other police people, it would appear, policemen and women, are trying to load him into their car and take him away, either to protect him, because this guy, I mean, I think the community there, whoever they are going to lynch the hell out of him if he doesn't get out. So it's either to protect him or because they're going to arrest him. I'm not even sure what that is. So I don't want to put, bad intentions into the other policemen. But watch this idiot. Just take a look.
Yes. Yeah. Armoni. Rapela shu. Mona is drunk. Mona cause accident.
Which was not for him.
Mona.
Don't you want to move your car so that we don't cause as much traffic?
Because this accident, Ash, this guy.
Yeah, but when we got a smooth tire, they want to arrest us.
Mona.
Yes, sir. When we have one smooth tire, they want to arrest us. He hit the lady, and then now it's time to run away.
Ash, when?
Yeah.
Hi, Chief, why? Why? Because he's your member. Uskama protect, Chief. Why are you stop it? Why are you stop it? Amanyana, why are you stop it, Chief? Uta you demand and what uniform? Una kwayang says. Remember, umisa guy. Says, "Wana tutimuntu." Yeah, maru umisa guy when. Why mutabisa? Why mutabisa? Yes. Why le mutabisa says no wa mutabisa awususkama protect uskama protect wa mutabisa when bonota.
I mean, this guy is so drunk.
He's wasted. He's absolutely wasted.
The poor woman on the bike, I think she's alive. I mean, I certainly hope so. But this fucking idiot, he's like, the one guy's pulling him by his belt like you'd pull an infant child around, and he's like keeps rubbing his face.
Because he can't even walk.
No,
he can't even walk. Like he's that lit, and like the sun is up, So it's definitely during the day. But what's interesting is that his colleagues, who are his fellow policemen and women, are escorting him into the vehicle. Like, come, let's get you out of here. There's
Yeah.
no police work being done. I don't see anybody
No.
trying to arrest him. I don't like leave that man to the community, is what I say. Let the community deal with him. And then after
Right.
that, they can take him to the courts. But right now, it just seems like they're trying to get him out of the scene, because he's the culprit. No one there is saying, okay, cool, let's call whoever. Like, it's just like, oh no, he's done something bad. Let's slap him on the wrist and get him out of here, because the community is pissed. They are
Look,
pissed. And
I tell you something. If we did that as ordinary citizens, we would be arrested immediately. If someone was filming it, we would be public enemy number one.
Without a
Becky
doubt.
Taylor always has so much to say. You remember him during lockdowns telling us, "You must be in bed by 9 o'clock," talking to us like children. Remember that? This is the man who works for us. Where is Becky Taylor when this kind of clip reaches the surface, and where this gets spread around? Where is he then, with his big mouth and his stupid hat? Where is he?
And this happens a lot more than we see. Luckily this one has surfaced and we're privy to it. But I don't think something like this is rare. I definitely think police officers are constantly just getting away with gang, and life kind of goes for them. We just lucky that this one got recorded.
Again, like, this is a scene obviously in an urban area from what I can tell, but like in rural South Africa, you're just at the mercy of these police people, and they are so used to
common.
And these are such low functioning people. I mean, they're not even mediocre. They're like below, because mediocre would be a compliment for someone like that. I'll bet you he's not literate, has no idea what his job entails. The fact that he is drunk during the day in uniform means he doesn't even have the faintest, like, this guy hasn't got the faintest idea what it means to be a policeman, right?
Yeah, no, you can see that it's just one of those situations where he's seriously just not taking his job. You know what I wonder about, Gareth? How easy is it to become a policeman in South Africa? Because when you watch the movies, it's like in the States, you have to go through some hectic training, you have to write all these tests, they do all these physicals things, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm sure we have a similar concept in South Africa, but it doesn't look very difficult. It looks like anybody can just like knock on the door and say, hey, can I become a cop? And then say yes. I don't think most of them even care about protecting South African citizens.
No.
They just generally don't. No. Their aura is just like, how easy, Gareth, you can apply right now and they'll just say yes. What's the actual process?
Yeah, I could probably walk into any. I mean, listen, for those people who say they can't get a job, I mean, our police will take all comers by the sound of things. And by the way, police recruitment is at an all-time low. So despite the fact that it's super easy, no one wants to be a policeman because it's such a shit job, and there's no respect. We've gone and we've put morons in charge of people who we want to keep us secure. Now, if you have idiots at the top and you have competent people underneath, how long do you think those competent people are going to stick around to be told what to do by idiots? Not long, right? And if you have idiots in charge, they don't appoint smart people to important positions. What they do is they get rid of all the smart people because it makes them look bad, and they hire dumber people even than them. So you've got bad, dumb leaders who are hiring even dumber, even worse people underneath them. And then obviously people in the market look at this and they go, well, I want to be a policeman. I want to serve and protect. I want to learn to deal with dangerous situations. I want to be able to keep the public order. There's a certain kind of personality that goes into policing. And you can maybe say that there's something about that also has a lot to do with this. But nobody wants to be a policeman in South Africa at the moment. Why? Because it used to be that there was a structure. You could climb the hierarchy. You could, if you were a competent, brilliant policeman, and I've known a few in my time, so it's not like all the police are useless and stupid. There are a lot of very, very capable people, but the number is dwindling all the time because those people look at it and they go, there's no room for me to like climb the ladder and climb the hierarchy here. No one's going to promote me because I'm too good at my job and I make the bosses look stupid. right?
Exactly. No,
So
exactly.
we don't have
No,
to talk about this. And
100%.
by the way, that was for those people who want to know, it was posted by Ian Cameron, who we've had on the Burning platform before and who I've been following. And if you follow this guy, I mean, at least he is onto it. And, he makes a big enough noise and gets enough attention, even though a lot of people try to ignore him. He's a very smart guy who gets the attention that you need in order to make these things work and to get some kind of improvement. So I want to see what happens to this policeman. I mean, a lot of people in the comments are saying already, this guy, nothing's going to happen to him. It's just docket will go missing. Yeah, Tracy says the docket will go. The police will launch an investigation of their own. A committee will be set up that goes on forever, shielded employment. And that's about right.
Just another day. Just another day. Nothing's going to happen. Life is going to continue. And that poor woman, hopefully she'll be okay. Story of South Africa.
This guy might even be Minister of Police one day, because that's what happens in the current regime. It's promoted to your level of incompetence. A couple of my family, says Viasan, joined the police in the late 90s. They went for some real training back then. Went in fat, came out lean. Well, that's another thing. Is, I get into a lot of trouble for the things I say about fat people on the show. But the reality is, if you're in the police and you cannot apprehend someone because you are morbidly obese, you're no use in the police. I'm sorry. There are jobs for you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't find employment anywhere. There's lots that you can do. Well, there's less that you can do than a healthy, fit person. And you're basically just slowly killing yourself. But, in a lineup of jobs that are appropriate for people who have no athletic ability whatsoever, I wouldn't say policing is among them. Back in 1994, a friend of mine, Tracy says, applied to go to police college. Her dad is a cop. Her mom is a cop. It's all she ever wanted. She got turned down. Good grades, good sportswoman, no reason. See?
They were probably just like, not that bloodline. That bloodline is out here making all of us look like crap. No ways. I mean, what is the reason? Dude, have you seen I don't know if you've noticed, but every time I get stopped by the cops, it's mainly like the women who stop me. They'll come to the window, they'll knock, they'll talk, whatever. Dude, like the belts that they are wearing are hanging on for dear life, because I'm sure every little bit of KFC that they can get their freaking grubby little hands on, dude, those people are just way too overweight to be doing those jobs. I'm like, what is going on? Like, how are you guys getting approved in these? Like, how are you gonna chase me? How, ma'am? How do you plan on chasing me when your belt is hanging on for dear life?
We talk about how many times we've got away with stuff in South Africa because these guys come up to you and they're like, just buy me lunch or whatever. So you buy them lunch and you don't have to deal with a fine or any of that stuff. And of course, if we lived in an ideal world, everyone is complicit. We all have to obey the law, blah, 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 blah. But the other day, there was a roadblock for something. It was during the day. I mean, it was like middle of the day, right? And I saw all these policemen pulling cars over, and there's one of those fine vehicles and things. And I'm like, how could you be fining people? You see, if you fine people on South Africa's roads, the roads themselves have to be roadworthy. If you're going to fine people for not having roadworthy cars, but you've got potholes all over the road and they're never well lit at night. And I mean, I drove through Midrand the other night, and the lights were strobe lights. The street lights looked like strobe lights. They were on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. I was like, is there a disco going on that I wasn't invited to here? I mean,
it's Midrand, Gareth. It's Midrand. Mid is at the bottom.
Midrand is rough. But I'll say this, like, you can't be fining people for having unroadworthy cars or driving too fast or whatever it is, if you don't even provide the means for them to do it legally. Like if they can't follow the rules because you make it impossible for them to follow the rules, then there are no rules worth applying. And I saw so many people, the cops are like waving them down and they just drove. They're like, fuck you. I'm not even stopping to buy you KFC. That's how little respect I have for you at the moment. And this is unfortunate. Yeah, and I'm sorry, like I don't want to depress anyone first thing on a Tuesday morning because I know everybody's thinking about this, but I'm also not going to hide my head in the sand and pretend like with all this that's going on that everything's okay. Like, Fiki Nimbalula does on her account, where everything's fine. Don't worry, everything's cool. We're
We
still
got
pretending to
this.
be a government. Everything works. I mean, it's just child. It really is
Yeah,
child.
the
Anyway,
frustration levels are getting high. I just hope that we can use this frustration collectively to try and do some good, or to try and at least like
right.
get their attention in a way that's going to scare them, because we all just sit and complain and like, oh, this sucks. It sucks for all of us. So let's take all of that frustration. Let's come together as a country and just like come up with a plan, come up with some
Well,
sort of like rebuttal, And I think running
mhm.
away from the cops when they try to stop you down is a good start. It's a good start. I'm here for that.
Well, it's called civil disobedience, right? And it's pretty much broken down anyway because the only
Mm,
people who seem to be caught or apprehended for anything these days are the petty criminals and the people who are trying to abide by the law. The people who break the law
mm.
every day, they just they stay out there looking like they're having the best time.
Dude,
Anyway, I wanted to talk about some of the things that you did because you had an amazing weekend, and I saw on your Instagram that you did bungee jumping. Woohoo!
I did. I'm actually still recovering, to be honest with you. It was a crazy, crazy experience, and I always wanted to do it after I did the graskop, the jump there. I was like going to Tikama before the year end, no matter what. And luckily, I got an opportunity to go. And man, it was just so dope. Oh, Gareth, it was so dope.
So,
I was just like
Lebang,
flying.
isn't that the highest bungee jump in the country or something, or in the
It's
southern
the highest
hemisphere or
in the
something?
world, and I think it's highest in the world for like a while. But I know in Dubai they built another one last year, just recently. So now it's the second highest. But hey, it's still high. It is freaking
Sure.
high, and your body's just moving at like 100 and something kilometers, and your hair is just all over the place, and you can barely breathe. It's crazy. It's pretty wild out there. What was interesting was like how many different people were there. There were like 80%, I think two buses full of people from like Pakistan, like that side of the world.
Wow.
They were all out there in numbers and they all jumped. Like every single of them, the kids, the teens, the mamas, the grandmamas, they all jumped. And I'm like, are you guys sure? They're like, yeah, we're on holiday. So, we just want to have a good time. I'm like, damn, this is crazy. Yo, Gareth, it was wild. It was absolutely wild. I would do it again and again and again. Is the point. It was expensive though. It was like 1,500 rand to jump, but
Well,
like
I mean,
those things are
it's
priceless.
probably yeah. And listen, you don't want to fly by night bungee jump thing. You don't want to take the chance. The guys
No, this
buying
isn't the kind of.
cheap equipment. You pay for something like that, then it's for real. They've got safety people
Yeah,
checking it out. They're
yeah,
complying
no,
with that, and because I mean, again,
sure,
it's fine to have rules, but if you don't have anyone implementing them, what's the point? So I do think
exactly.
it's a bit reassuring to pay for a bungee jump.
That yes,
an expensive
definitely.
rather than
I think it would be a little bit suspicious if it wasn't that much. Like if it was like $400 to bungee jump, I don't think I'd want to bungee jump there because like it's a bit too low. Like it has to make sense, and it truly, truly did, man. It was the whole team is just on it. You feel safe, you feel secure, but the thing is so quick. It is so quick. Like the only really scary part is jumping off the ledge. But once in the air, like it's fun. It's like really, really cool. Some people
I mean,
pass out. Some people do a whole lot of things.
did you scream?
I screamed, of course, but I was screaming out of like pure exhilarating freaking adrenaline. It was just like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, why don't I do this every single day? Like it was like hectic, like you get up then you're like, I'm alive. It's really just an alive, thrilling feeling and experience that I would like to do with more people and hopefully my family and those kinds of people that are just angry at the world. Let them go and jump. You just come back a different person. You're like, oh, actually, you know what?
Yeah.
Actually, so
Well, a little bit of
yeah, it's
a little
dope.
bit of adrenaline, I think, is good for you, and that sort of experience is really, it's a once in a lifetime. And once you've done it, it takes a little bit of fear out of you. Most people we live in kind of a bit of a bubble. We don't really push ourselves. We don't feel the kind of exhilaration that, former generations of our ancestors used to feel, like whether it was going into battle or fighting off wild animals or, dealing with all the depredations of all the previous kinds of things that humans had to deal with. But I think this sort of gives you a little window into it. And it feels bloody amazing, right? I mean, like chasing that thrill. You can see how these people, these adventurers who love that stuff and live for it, you can see why they go around the world just chasing these highs. And I mean, as you were saying, there were people from all the way from Pakistan, like whole families of people coming to do this because it's the world's highest bungee jump or whatever. How cool is that we still have, some of the best places. And my God, is that area that you were in beautiful? Wow.
Yeah, no, 100%. I really felt like a tourist in my own country. I was like the group of about 9 other people were there for my best friend's birthday. We stayed in Plettenberg, but I looked around me and I'm like, I feel like a foreigner, like I don't see a lot of people that look like me. We all just bring like touristy type things. And it really made me appreciate this country. Because we did the garden route for maybe for over 3 days, just driving around there. And oh my word, this country is ridiculously beautiful. Like, it's not even funny. It's actually like breathtaking. And we're in Joburg most of the time. We're not privy to the true beauty of what this country is. I mean, we're privy to a whole lot of other stuff. But when you just take a moment and you just, step outside a little bit, did you forget about the shitty cops? You forget about the electricity. You forget about the crappy government. You forget about Kenny Gnene pulling stunts. Just for that second, it's like, damn, this place is in fire. It's beautiful.
Let me point out 2 really stupid things quickly that have come up in the comment section. First of all, Ted says, Midrand's roads are as useless as Discovery telling me at 3 a.m. I need to park my car inside because there might be hail. So I sometimes think, wow, that's really useful, Discovery, because I've been getting them over the last couple of days. Storm warning or whatever. But I think about most people who get these things, and by then it's too late. Your car is already parked, or you're already at work, or you're already home, and maybe you haven't got a garage to park your car in. They're like, you're going to have a terrible storm in your area. Do you get those?
No, not really. Hey, lucky enough, I don't. But I know that it does happen, and yes, their timing is always very, very off. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I've definitely already parked my vehicle. I'm not moving anytime soon.
Right. And the other one, this is what I really found stupid. Listen to this quickly. This is from, hang on a second. Let me just find the damn thing. Fatima. She says, this is so ridiculous. So apparently in her area in Umhloti, she says, our street lights in Umhloti are switched on during the day, but not in the evenings or the nights.
What is the reason? What is the reason?
Oh wow. Can you imagine being the dumb person at the municipality there who goes, it's daytime now, we need those lights on. And then at night they're like, switch them off. It's like the opposite of what you want. Unbelievable.
I just don't think
anyway,
I don't think anybody's there is doing any thinking, to be honest. There's no thinking happening there. It's just you can do whatever you want. Get my kids, it's like I'm gonna do whatever I want. That's what's happening. But yeah, Plettenberg Bay was awesome. I loved the bungee jump. It was amazing. I also went to the Tsikama Nature Reserve, I think. The nature reserve. It was so beautiful, Gareth. Like I was even like seashell collecting there. I almost got in trouble with the security because you're not allowed to take anything from nature reserve and all that kind of stuff. But I did. It was sick, man. It was sick. But the weather was crap. Like the whole time I was there, it was freezing, and there was absolutely no sun. And the Airbnb that I stayed at had a jacuzzi, and the jacuzzi wasn't working. So that was like the only crappy thing. But when I got back to Joburg, it was like as cold and as miserable. So we just like made our own fun and kept ourselves warm, and just like did what adults do.
you need to do these little holidays, these little breaks away. It's not even a holiday because it was like you took one
Yeah,
extra
like
day.
4 day. Yeah.
So it was. I mean, it's really good that you do this because God knows people are feeling a bit burnt out, and if you're feeling that way, you don't have to go and spend a fortune on a 2-week holiday. You really just need a weekend where you can let loose,
Yeah.
breathe properly,
Breathe.
give yourself a bit of leeway, some wiggle room, and
But
stop.
definitely it's
Like,
it's finding the right people to do that kind of thing with. Like if you can find like the right group of people or just the right person that you're gonna be rolling with, wherever you go, as long as the company that you're with is dope, then you'll have a good time, regardless of what the weather is like outside, regardless of
That's
where you are in the world. You'll make
absolutely
your
right.
own fun in that wherever you go. So yeah,
Absolutely,
definitely
you could go to the
encourage that.
best place in the world with terrible people, and it'll be horrible. And you can go to the worst
Mm-hmm.
place in the world with good people, and you'll have a great time. Okay, let's
Correct.
talk Africanalysis this morning with JJ Cornish, who joins us. It's of course brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School, and they're helping us to give you all the information about what's happening around the African continent. Here he is, JJ Cornish. Good morning, sir.
Bonjour to you. The bungee jumping, did they have a sign there saying bungee jumping free for merchant bankers and politicians, no strings attached? No.
Unfortunately not, JJ. Sure, must have missed it.
I was down in that part of the world. There was bungee jumping. I went up to the guy in charge and said, hoeveel kost het om te spring? And he said, nee, kost fokol, maar as jy tou wil hê, is dit R500.
I love it. So, JJ, first of all, how are you? And have you been bungee jumping lately?
Never. No, I've never bungee jumped or parachuted or done any of those things. And I use my cover as a responsible father for not doing that. If I hadn't done it before I had children, I thought maybe not a good idea now. Eh?
So,
but
let's take a look.
Yeah.
No, go on.
No, I'm busy writing a book on William Schlapo, our ambassador to the African Union, ambassador to Washington, and his wife, who's a doctor. She's bungee jumped, And I asked him, how could you let your wife bungee jump? I mean, and he said, well, he looked at me like, who would? Some people have to do these things, and I'm looking at one of them right now. Have to do these things.
Exactly, the bungs right there. All right, so JJ, Sudan has kind of dominated the news lately on the continent. Well, certainly until we got into a spat with the United States ambassador over giving Russia arms. But we'll talk about that just now. Let's start off with Sudan. They cannot pay for the humanitarian crisis that has been caused by refugees fleeing the fighting that's going on there, despite these Jeddah talks that you did tell us about that are designed to secure humanitarian conditions. The army has frozen the funds of paramilitaries. Now, just again, for people who don't know what the hell's going on, because we can't be expected to keep up to date with all of this, just remind us very briefly of the origin of this problem, and then tell us how dire the situation really is from a humanitarian point of view in Sudan right now.
Well, we have the army under al-Burhan, and the army, of course, has now taken power, so they're running the country. But al-Bashir, the former president, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, the Janjaweed, the wild horsemen, crazy horsemen, they in Darfur began to suppress the people there. And again, Nubian people, not Arab people. And from them began the rapid support forces under Khamenei, the head of that. And Omar al-Bashir rather liked that. And these guys now grew into a force of their own. And it's the army and the paramilitaries who are now battling for control of, effectively, of Sudan. And their battle has gone into the second month. The talks in Jeddah, hosted by Saudi Arabia and the United States, have not produced the humanitarian corridors they wanted. And the bombardment of Khartoum and the big cities around it, Bari and Omdurman, which are the two twin cities of Khartoum, continues. Now, the fact is, Sudan is in a rough neighborhood, 7 neighbors. And when I list them, you'll see you wouldn't want to have to rely on any of them. Libya, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia. You wouldn't want to rely. And apparently, according to the United Nations, 810,000, nearly 1 million people are going to flee that country. Now they, and more than 100,000 have already done that. And these 7 countries, but particularly Egypt, Chad, South Sudan, have been taking the brunt of them, and they simply cannot afford to pay for these people. They can't afford the service. Apparently, they've got 15% of the needs of these people that they can supply. Now, what would happen is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and that's the building in Pretoria where I don't think you did camp outside it wanting to go to Canada, did you?
No,
most people in Pretoria did. But anyway, and they were moved very gently by the police. But the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which does excellent work, they say they've gone to the international community saying, help us, we need help. And this time, people have turned something of a deaf ear to this and said no. And there's been the help that they're getting is much less than they would normally have expected. So they're battling like mad, these countries, to supply the needs. You know, the Western powers all say we don't want these refugees coming, and they put up walls as Hungary does, and they pay off Libya as the other countries have done. But the fact is, when you get refugees in Africa, the greatest majority of those, overwhelming majority of them, simply move to the next country and can hardly afford them. Uganda, for example, takes in a hell of a lot of refugees. All these countries take in enormous amounts, more than they can afford. Uganda, incidentally, talking about the army, they also have a special force that protects Yoweri Museveni and special installations. And that force is not set in law like the Janjaweed or the RSF in Sudan. So a danger of a return of that kind of fighting in Uganda exists. And that's something we're going to have to watch very carefully.
Well, JJ, I mean, unfortunately, where you have terrible governments and you have huge amounts of violence and destruction and kind of the chaos that we see so often on this continent, people just want to get out. Eventually they go, I'm sorry, I can't handle this anymore. I'm going to try and take my family to a place where they will be safe. The question I always have is, when you see these immigrants arriving in, you know, Syria and Greece and Italy, in Spain, it's always men of working age. You know, refugees, almost you would think, would be mostly women and children. Is that the case in Sudan too? Or are the women and children left behind because they really cannot fend for themselves and the men are going out to seek opportunity? How does it work?
Well, you know, in some cases, for example, the Syrians, who are sending more refugees than others, they send young men. They send young men to establish themselves and to send money back to the families. I was in Turkey where, you know, they were camping on the beachfront. And I mean, most of them were young. When I say young men, some were boys, 14, 15 years old. Where are your parents?
Right.
Back home, they tell me. But they have to get into Europe and then try and work it from there. And you know, they risk their lives crossing the sea. And as we'll say in the next story, they risk their lives crossing the Sahara Desert, and they don't get treated well at all. So, you know, but it's absolutely the saddest story of the continent, that people are prepared to risk their lives to get out of it because they just can't see a life for themselves. The Tunisians, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful country, but they are dying in droves. trying to cross from Tunisia, which is the closest country to Europe, if African country to Europe, across that sea to Italy. And I mean, I've spoken to them again. Why are you doing this? I mean, look at the country you have. Why can't you try and build something for yourself here? And they said, it's hopeless. There's nothing for us to do here. There's no economic future for us here. We've got to go. And they go. And I've spoke to people, and then 2 weeks later I learned that some of them had actually died at sea. So it's very, very sad.
JJ, is it true here in the comments, Theodoros says Uganda has the most refugees in the world?
I don't know if it's the most refugees in the world, but they have a huge number, an absolutely huge number. And that many things wrong in Uganda, but that generosity of spirit they show putting up these refugees is quite amazing. And the fact that the international community doesn't help them enough is an indictment of the international community, I think.
Congo Chris says he's picked up a habit from you, JJ. When people ask me how I am, I now say I'm exceedingly well. So look, you're teaching us more than just African social, political, and economic change and all the goings on of the continent. You're also teaching us how to respond to people in social situations.
Well, the thing to say is, any better, I'd have to tell the cops, because no Malungu of my age deserves to be well. I should be racked with guilt about what's happened before me and filled with despair about what is to happen to my children. So when I feel good, maybe I should report it to the police because I've been doing something wrong.
Well, no, you should be happy, and carrying guilt is probably the most terrible thing that so many people do that does them no good at all and doesn't help anybody else, by the way. It just eats up the guilty, the person who's feeling guilty. So let's talk about Niger for a second, because we often talk about Nigeria, but Niger is a huge country which is just north of that. And the retired teacher that's in the news at the moment, Azizu Cheho, using a beat-up old Toyota sedan is a lifesaver to thousands who've been dumped in the Sahara by Algerian authorities. Now, you mentioned the lengths people go to get around and to get out of countries that they no longer want to be in. And this is a perfect example. Tell us about this teacher. He sounds like some kind of almost a hero, like an Oscar Schindler type person who's rescuing people from obviously certain death in the desert.
Saved many, many, many more lives than a doctor would have. He's 57 years old. He's got this 11-year-old Toyota Corolla, but he's organized this group he set up. Now, basically, these people get turned away by the Algerians. They get on trucks. Then they get flung off these trucks and they have to walk to the village, the nearest village, sometimes 15, 20 kilometers through the desert. If they're able to contact him or he has patrols going out, he takes them and puts them up. So he has saved many, many lives. But there are 20,000 people who found themselves in this predicament, who were turned back from the border by the Algerians last year. And so far this year, 15,000 already have been turned back. So the situation there is parlous. And somebody like Azizu, who manages to do this work, deserves, the Nobel Prize, for goodness sake. But it really is quite amazing. And, the selflessness of some people is probably why I have hope and I'm able some days to feel happy. Because when you read stories like this, here's this man who has nothing. He's got a very, very simple little house, and he's got this organization. And some people have put up some 3-wheelers that they can go quickly through the desert to get these people in despair and in mortal despair, because if they don't get rescued, they drop and die where the truckers left them.
Horrible. But I mean, what an inspiring story in the middle of all of this chaos. So let's talk about Algeria and Nigeria quickly, because Algeria has just overtaken Nigeria as Africa's #1 oil producer. And we all thought that that Nigeria was in an unassailable position up there at the top of the charts when it comes to oil. We know Angola produces quite a lot, but they're quite a way behind Nigeria. Now, Algeria, I didn't realize, but they're a major, major oil producer, producing more than 1 million barrels a day.
Yeah, I think I might be remiss here. The fact is, it is Angola who has actually overtaken Nigeria.
Oh,
Algeria has
okay.
drawn level with Nigeria. But now this has happened before. Every time there's a real problem in Nigeria and the oil production goes down, up comes Angola. At the moment, Angola is producing 1.06 million barrels of oil a day, and they are the biggest producer in the world. That is their April figures, according to OPEC. The Nigerians have fallen to 900,000, and the Algerians are at that level too, 900,000. So we've got a good bit of oil coming, but the thing about Nigeria is they have unemployment, they have inflation, sluggish corporate and private spending, you know, so they have, when they have economic problems, they have grown up economic problems. Of course, the argument persists about which is the biggest economy in the on the continent. Is it Nigeria? Is it South Africa? You know, that always is the argument. Many people argue that it's not South Africa who should be a member of BRICS, it's Nigeria. Well, given the trouble that BRICS has given us of late, perhaps we should let the Nigerians take that seat. But the fact is, Angola now, in April of this year, was the largest producer of oil on the continent. That happened back in 2022. I know that. And then also previously, again, whenever there's a problem, in Nigeria, certainly with the area up in the northeast, you know, Boko Haram and that sort of area, when they cannot produce or export the oil they want, up comes Angola, fills their place, and it's just done it again.
All right, well, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to just pass right through and ignore what's gone on with South Africa and the US ambassador and Russia, because this is obviously a big foreign affairs spectacle. And as I said to you, Sudan has been in the headlines quite a lot. We've suddenly decided to usurp that position from them for no good reason. What do you surmise from what the US ambassador said about how we're giving arms or selling arms to Russia, how Russia has responded by saying, no, this is not true at all, and how the South African government, through Naledi Pandora, Minister of International Relations, has said, no, it's a perfectly legitimate deal that we've done. There's nothing to hide here. It's not that we're siding with Russia, where we clearly are. I mean, what do you make of all of this, JJ? Is this just more Keystone cops, people falling over their own feet, stupid incompetence, and, you know, never ever ascribe to malice what can be explained by incompetence when it comes to our government? What do you think's really going on here?
Well, you know, for a start, for them initially to have said they didn't know what was loaded onto the Lady R at a naval port where they have cameras and binoculars and people knowing exactly what's happening in the naval port, to say we didn't know what they were loading onto the ship, absolutely disingenuous. And this latest thing where the ambassador said, I bet my life that they were supplying arms, when he said this to journalists, there was a démarche. I hate to when people use démarche as a verb. They démarched the thing. They summoned him for a démarche, and he then said, this is the information I got. I'm very sorry that it's created the storm. He didn't apologize for saying it, but the government release, this DIRCO release, said that the ambassador had apologized unreservedly. Now, absolute nonsense. He never did. And so that's further infuriated the Americans. And, you know, when we look at our friends in terms of trade, and, you know, in diplomacy, you don't have friends, you have interests. And when we look at our interests, our interests with the United States and with the European Union far surpass anything that that Russia can provide. At the moment, the Americans are considering reviewing the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is AGOA, which gives access, tax-free access to the American markets for African products, because South Africa, many countries to provide, like Lesotho provides some textiles, as does other countries to the north. South Africa uses AGOA assiduously. They send more products and greater numbers and greater value products to the United States and draw enormous benefit from this. So for some time, long before we got into trouble with them, people were saying, no, we should look at this again because South Africa is benefiting too much. And Willilian Schlapo, the person I'm working on the book on, he, as ambassador there, had to argue all the time for keeping AGOA, saying it's very important and there's reciprocity. Your goods come into South Africa at a favorable rate because of it. So if as a result of something like this, we upset the United States enough and they say, okay, you get no more AGOA rights, because they give those rights only to the countries that they approve of on political and human rights level. But if they disapproved of us on that level because we're supplying arms to Russia, we would pay enormously. And we're already paying in terms of the dollar climbing up the rand,
It wouldn't be the first time that we cut off our nose to spite our own faces, so I wouldn't put it past our government. I see Colonel Chris Wyatt here in the comments saying, Angola's oil production is down precipitously from where it was a decade ago in 2014, when it was nearly $1.8 million per barrel, I think, and down...
Barrels per day, BPD.
Barrels per day, and down from almost 2.5 years before that. So their capacity is actually slowing, not improving. I mean, that obviously just means Nigeria is slowing much faster.
Much faster.
If that makes any sense.
Or even faster, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, interesting comments. Why is it, this is a question, that when the Saudis have oil, they make sure nobody is poor, but when an African country has oil, everyone remains poor? Yeah, we could ask that question, right? I mean, why is it that oil...
The Saudis make sure everybody benefits. It's a smaller country, and when you say a Saudi name, up for Abu Bakr, Asedi, Hussein, Muhammad, they will say, no, that's not enough names. I don't know who that is. Put another name or two in there to know exactly who we're talking about. And because their royal family is so large. So, yes, the royal family does very well out of it. But the people in Sudan who are battling, just like they are anywhere in the world, but not as many as in Africa, obviously. And certainly black gold into oil is to Saudi Arabia, but in Africa it's often called the black curse.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just opening doors for all kinds of skullduggery and gangsters and warlords, but that's the case almost anywhere in the world at any time in history. And JJ, you're the guy who's keeping us on top of these stories. Thank you very much for your time today. It's good to see you, JJ. Cornish, brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School, looking at what happens around the African continent. We'll catch up with you in 2 weeks.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. JJ Cornish, which brings us to just after 7 o'clock. Don't go anywhere, everybody. Stick around.
This week,
more to come.
On the Auto Trader Podcast.
From your train of thoughts, how would you define price rating to somebody who doesn't know any idea what it is? They've never been to the site yet. What is price ratings?
So price ratings is a machine learning algorithm that takes all of the cars and the history of what's gone through the Auto Trader platform for similar vehicles, and then the algorithm tries to predict what the price range of that car should be within, where that price point should be, and again, it's not a specific price. It's within a range. Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. We are here live Tuesday morning. We had some power issues at the studio this morning, but we managed to sort some of those out. We'd like to hear from you, and we have our phone lines working regardless on 0832955769. If you want to give us a call, you can check in with us and see what's happening. We'd like to hear from you. Gareth, I was listening to you yesterday morning, says Max Sony, going on about God. This is not the first time he's done this to you and us on the show. And Gord. You spelled it like God. Well, I got a pathetic message from Gord yesterday, apologizing. Let me just
did he leave you hanging?
He phoned. Well, he messaged us at like 3 a.m. Sorry, I missed the show this morning. I mean, I just, I don't know. Anyway, it's fine. We won't be having
forgive
him
him. No, forgive him. I personally would love to see him like soon. Let's just forgive him and forget that he left us hanging, and then we keep it moving.
All right.
It's always fun.
We'll be taking your petitions on whether or not, you can petition me. And if there are sufficient petitions, I may just let Gord back on. Who knows?
Hashtag return of the Gord. Dum dum dum.
Yeah. All right. You start a movement, Lebang. Let's see what happens.
I'm not really in the mood to start a whole movement. Maybe let's put up a poll, right? Let's put up a poll. How many people think God should be forgiven? If enough people want us to forgive him, then we'll just get him back. If people don't want us to forgive him, then tough.
All right.
Yes. Thank you, Sean.
Can I ask you quickly? So you went away with a bunch of people, and this is interesting because on Saturday I arranged for a group of 7 of us to go shooting clay pigeons.
What
and
kind
things.
of shooting? Oh, okay.
Whenever you organize and you're the organizer for this stuff, you have to be the one who coordinates everybody. You have to get everybody to pay, which is a nightmare. You have to make sure everybody's on time, that everybody has the right information. It's so much of a schlep that sometimes it's not worth it. And I like being the one who makes cool things happen or, invites people to interesting stuff or whatever. But I've got to say, like, arranging adults and getting them organized is a lot like arranging children. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I mean, if I had to choose, I might actually pick the arranging of the children, just because adults are so messy. I think you're right, Gareth. Having to firstly pick all of those different personalities that won't work together is the first hard part, because most people are assholes, and imagine just a room full of assholes. Nobody likes that. So there's Then there's okay, everybody needs to take out this much money, and this money is going to be for that. We sending contributions to this and that bank account. It's a lot. It's very messy. And then it's worse if now everybody's going to be almost staying together for like a minimum of like 3 days. Like if it's like a weekend thing, at least with a day, you all get there, you do your thing, and then you leave. But if you're all staying in the same house, in the same room, I personally realize like I just don't have many people that I know in the level or in that way that I can trust enough to have a solid good time with over that period. And that's why I just kind of like keep to myself. But when you do find people that you actually get along with that well, we don't have those kinds of problems where money isn't an issue, where people aren't fighting, blah blah blah, blah, then like hold on to those people for dear life. Because where do you find that many people that like you just generally get along with and it's just gonna be a vibe? Yeah. It's adulting.
Well, you've first of all you match up the personalities and everything, and sometimes it's fun to see people who don't know each other get to know each other, and you never know.
Yeah.
Friendships could result from that. Business partnerships. You never really know what could happen. I always think it's nice to have a bit of variety. You can't only be friends with the same people you've been friends with for 20 years, because
100%.
even though you never make new old friends, it is occasionally a good idea for you to keep expanding your friends circle, because I think you can get a bit boring if you see the same people week after week, month after month, year after year. I think it makes a lot of people
Yeah.
very predictable and kind of a bit dreary, you know. Oh, we're going to see these people again this weekend. We saw them last weekend. We're going to see them next weekend as well. It's like a little bit, it's kind of insular, and again, it's people living in
Yeah.
a bubble. But do you find it is difficult to get people to pay for things? I mean, this is not my experience with the people from Saturday, but it certainly is the experience of a lot of other people. They organize everything,
Mm.
and then
Mm.
someone, everybody pays a deposit, for example, because you have to do this for accommodation. You're not going to get accommodation without paying a deposit. And some people are just like really slack on that front. They're like, oh, well, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Yeah, yeah. And then suddenly it comes to like 2 days before you leave, and you realize that the one idiot hasn't paid their deposit, and now it becomes your problem. Lebang? I think we've lost Lebang. I think she's gone. Oh, there she is. Are you back? Mm-hmm. Right. I'm going to give her a chance to catch up.
Hello?
All right. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're back. Sorry, I was just saying, these people who don't pay their deposit, they don't get there on time, they don't, or they cancel at the last
Yeah.
minute. That's my worst, is the ones who cancel at the last minute. Oh my God. Like, come on. I've gone to the trouble of organizing this thing. Why did you cancel?
Mm.
These are
Exactly.
supposedly
It's
your
just
friends.
complete inconsiderateness. And at the same time, Gareth, people are living way above their means. A lot of people, if they can't afford the trip, instead of just saying, you know what, it's a bad time for me, I'm still saving up for A, B, and C, they'll just say yes, knowing very well that they can't afford it. I remember going to Bella Bella maybe like 4 years ago with another group of friends. And in the 11th hour, on the day that we all are getting into the H1, my friend just like dished us like, hey guys, actually I'm not gonna be able to make it because A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Wrong.
we've booked the Airbnb, we've paid for the transport, we've already paid for some of the food. Can you imagine the stress of the organizers? So it does happen, and that's why again it's important that the people that you select to go to these things are like people that you can trust to be able to, play their part. Because people are just sneaky and tricky. And again, it's hard for a person to admit that actually this I can't afford. Let me live within my means for a change. A lot of people are just like gonna say yes to stuff that they have no business being a part of. We learn and we grow. I feel like as I get older, I'll probably find the right people that I must just stay with and stick close to for these
Yeah,
things.
but I mean, there's some people that you like them even though you know they're unreliable, and that you can't help it. They're friends of yours. You build it into the cake, so you just expect. Like there's this one friend of mine, and I really think she's bloody amazing, and she's wonderful. She always makes me laugh, and she's terrific to have her around. But she's never on
Mm.
time. Anything. Like if everybody says we'll be there at 6 o'clock, please believe me, she'll be there at 8:30, no matter what. So since Vasti, we've been lying to her. We basically say to her, oh, okay, party starts at 3, and then she'll be there at 6.
Justice. And
Yeah.
it's
You
always
have
the
to.
really, really cool people. Like you make excuses for their shitty behavior because they're so fun. They like the life of the party. So you need them there. So you're just like, okay, cool. They're gonna fuck it up
Yeah.
again. It's fine. It's
Well,
fine though. It's okay. You guys are enabling her. Enablers.
Yeah, eventually you do run out of like runway for these people. Eventually you do go,
Yeah.
okay, that's enough now. They haven't even
Yeah.
replied to an invite twice. I'm not going to invite them again. Anyway, we could talk about this some more in a minute, but I wanted to show you another clip from watching the news. All I have to do if I want to plan the show for the next day is watch the news on TV the night before, because here's a guy with this very strange speech pattern that I picked up on the news yesterday. This is on ENCA. Take a listen to this. You tell me what you think is going on here. All right, you ready?
NICD has picked up a increase of malaria cases and some severe malaria cases in the last 6 weeks. And we don't need to be too alarmed, but we certainly need to be aware.
What's happening there, Gareth?
We don't need to be too alarmed, but we need to be aware. Do you think he's putting on that voice, or do you think that's his actual voice?
What's going on, guys?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Is he like an actor? It's giving. Who's that guy? Who's that guy? With I can't think of his name. That actor, man. Gold member guy. Austin Powers. It's giving Austin Powers.
Well, he's got.
Yeah.
So his name is Dr. Chris van Straten. I've heard the name before somewhere. I'm not exactly sure what he does. It's said there in the blurb underneath him. Why would you really choose to talk like this if you don't have to talk like that? What's that all about? Right?
Yeah, that person is going through a lot. There's a lot of video clips that are just popping up that are questionable. Where you're like, what's actually going on?
Well,
I saw one yesterday.
I recorded
that
that myself, so I know it's not made up. It's not like I
yeah, it's real.
I was honestly watching the news and I thought, wow, that is a bizarre voice. I need to record that.
And you did. And thank you for sharing that with us. I saw a clip yesterday. There's this show, Gareth. I don't know if anybody's told you about it, where this guy is pretty much a cop. So the name of the show is called Zoktola, which basically means we will find you. So it's this policeman who is also doubling up as a presenter of the show. And he goes around into neighborhoods and he goes to drug dealers' houses, or he gets tipped on where people are selling drugs. And he gets to your house and he has a conversation like, hey, we heard you're selling drugs. Is this true or false? And you obviously deny. And then they go to like an ad break. When they come back from the ad break, these said drug dealers are now confessing everything. Like, I'll give you the cat, I'll give you the mandrakes, please don't search. Like, it's so funny. And that guy who's actually the host of the show is now like fearing for his life. Naturally, he's getting like a bunch of death threats from all these drug dealers, and it's a lot's been happening. But when I saw that clip, I was like, whoa. And then I went to check. It's an actual show. It's hilarious. Drugs are coming out of communities, and it's all over the country. Hey, it's not just Joburg. It's Eastern Cape, it's KZN. I saw a clip of them in some woman's mikuku, like her little shack in KZN. She had pounds and pounds of cocaine, of mandrake, of weed, it was like her bed was just full of drugs, and she was denying everything. She husband does all of this. I just live here, pretty much saying she's not a part of any of it. But yeah, it's happening, and that guy is doing God's work essentially. You know, he's getting the drugs off the streets, and a lot of the people that he's also confronting are Nigerians. A lot of them are Nigerians who are like, "Oh, please don't kill me, don't kill me." Hey, yeah, it's a lot going on. Like, they're so scared. They're scared for their life. And what's really funny is like the initial clip, they're like, I don't have any drugs. Me? I don't have drugs. And then when they come back from the ad break, these pissing their pants, they're crying, they're sweating. I don't know what they do in that little moment, but yeah, whatever it does, it's working. Yeah, the show is called Sizoktola.
Okay, I like this. I want to know who this person is, because we need to figure out what they do to them in the commercial breaks to make them piss themselves. Because if more people in this country were afraid of consequences, and this cop or whatever he is sounds like he's got a monopoly on that stuff. We need to figure out whatever his superpower is and get him around here. Imagine him going to the politicians' houses, saying to them, "Hey, what's going on here?" Woo! I'd love to see that. I'd love to see. Listen. I was thinking about it the other night. Game of Thrones gave us a lot of good ideas, right? I still think the shame bell, you know, the bell where you ring the bell, shame, shame, and the person has to go through the streets with no clothes on. Everybody throws fruit at them. We shout shame, shame, and we humiliate them publicly. That's still the best punishment in the whole universe for these guys. And I think a lot of these people who are such big deals in politics or wherever else, if we just did that to them, we'd be able to, listen, we've got a call.
Is someone phoning us?
Hello? Yeah, let me just put them on here.
Morning.
Yeah, good morning. What's up?
Morning.
Hey, I have a problem here.
Go on.
With the app, but it's fine. I will pass. I'll sort it out. Talking about friends who are unreliable, I had a single incident last Saturday. So this guy is saying, okay, guys, let's have a price. Fine. We're going to put together 100 rands. And suddenly he has 20 rands when you have to put money together.
Hold on. Just go through that again. You were having a braai and you told everybody 100 rand and this guy brought 20?
This guy said we should have a braai.
Yes.
We must put together 100 rands each person. And he came with 20 rands. He was borrowing money from us.
But he wants to
On the
host
last minute.
the braai. No, I don't think that's
Yes.
that's outrageous.
And it's just outrageous. And I have a very serious question.
Go on.
Is cancer still a thing? And what else? SAA, are those still operational?
Is SAA still a thing? I don't know,
Yes.
because apparently you can still book flights on SAA. I've heard they are still in business, but I don't know how. I mean, it makes no sense to me at all.
And PRASA?
PRASA is still a thing, believe it or not.
What do they wake up and do when they go to work?
I don't know. They sit around and they get paid by the state. They get paid by you, Mapelo. I'm sorry. It's bad news. You're paying for them. Even though nothing's happened. All right.
Okay, you didn't have to remind me, Gareth. But anyways, have a good day.
All right, you too, man.
Have a good one.
Are you sure it's not the Desmond Dube ads, says somebody. I don't know what that's all about. There's listen, I've got to talk about these outsurance ads just quickly. Graham brought them up. Please, if anybody knows someone at Outsurance, please tell them to stop making these terrible ads with Ilana Africa in a car with someone talking about how great Outsurance is. Listen, please, dear Lord God, and I know Outsurance made this incredible move, which they thought was the best idea ever, where they decided to do all their advertising in-house. And I don't know who's in charge of marketing at Outsurance, and I mean you no ill, but your 4-minute ads, people driving in cars with Ilana Africa, are the worst thing on television. And I don't watch a lot of TV, so I honestly I didn't know what to expect. But last night, I turned on the TV and I watched the news to prepare for this show. And I had to be subjected to what felt like an 8-minute long ad, but it was probably only 2.5, maybe 3. But it felt like hours that I was forced to watch this drivel with these terrible people. This one woman, Lebang, driving a car. Ilana Africa's in the passenger seat, and this woman's driving a car, but she's quite a big woman, and she's got big titties, and they're bouncing the whole time while she's going over like bumps in the road or potholes or whatever. And you just see these titties going like this the whole time, which made it somewhat entertaining, I will admit. But the rest of the ad, the whole idea behind the ad is so boring. It made me want to scream. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't make me want to buy it. It doesn't make me want to buy Outsurance. That's for absolute sure. There's not a part of this that is making me go, maybe I should get some Outsurance. Not one part.
Right?
And
it's not moving.
Don't come with that thing. And don't come with that thing that like, oh, there's no such thing as bad publicity. And the fact that Gareth and Lebang are talking about it this morning is great for us. No, it's not, guys. What we're saying about it is that it is shitty. That's what we're saying.
That's not good. It's not good at all. So I do a lot of auditions. Sometimes the agent will send me like a brief, and multiple times in the past 10 years, I've gotten a brief for an Outsurance ad, and it's always young black woman sitting in the car in the driver's seat. Presenter pops out and says blah 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 blah. They haven't changed a single thing, and I don't even go to those specific auditions because I'm like, big fucking yawn.
Well,
this is hogwash.
But
Nobody's
Lebang,
going to buy the product anymore or any less. This is just balls.
can I also say that the fact that they're auditioning actors for this tells you the whole story?
Yeah, because everything is just one big show.
It's made up. These are not even clients. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's really, really poor. And I honestly feel very sorry for them that they are so creatively bankrupt that this is what they have to rely on. And, you know, we've spoken to insurance companies about doing really interesting, authentic content here on Cliff Central, where you could tell us about, you know, which color cars get hijacked the most and which roads in South Africa are the worst and best for potholes, and, you know, things that are really helpful and interesting to people, but they're not interested. What they want to do is dumb ads with the same old that I can't imagine gets them anything. I don't see any upshot.
Yeah,
I really don't. Anyway, I just had to get that
it's
off my
not looking
chest because
not
I
looking
saw it
good.
last night. It's so bad. Oh my God. And they are spending a fortune. I mean, Super Jacob Zuma says 600 million rand budget per annum for those terrible ads.
Imagine.
Honestly.
Imagine. Like they better off just putting the CEO in a freaking black room with a microphone, just answering questions. Things that people
Yeah.
actually want to know more about. How does this affect my daily drive as I leave my home and go to work?
it's so bad.
That's what I want to know about. Nobody cares about all that
Carl-
other
Carl
stuff, bro.
Carl says you know an ad is terrible when an atheist prays to the Lord God for help. And that's exactly what I was doing. Graham says, are those ads still going? So, Graham, you brought this up and you don't even know if they're still going. He left South Africa 4 years ago. I was having a shot in the dark with that comment. Well, you're right. They're still there and they're worse than ever.
They are. Damn, Graham. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just so bad. Guess what, Gareth? When new car owners need insurance, OutSurance stands out in their mind among others. Maybe, but at what cost? I mean,
Yeah.
it is probably one of the
Is it these
unpopular-
conversations? I think
I don't
as
think
far
this
as
is
like
good.
talkability goes, they really do they've got everybody talking. Like we're talking about it right now, but we're not talking in the sense of, oh, let's call and find a quote. We're talking about it in the sense of we want nothing to do with you fucks. And I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
No,
It
I don't
ain't.
think it is. Anyway. All right, listen, let us turn our attention to a much bigger issue and something which I think we've tried to discuss some of the time on the show, and we don't really know enough about it, but it's something that affects everyone. And everybody in South Africa, everybody in the world at some point has someone in their life who ends up with some kind of cancer. And we've spoken about it as amateurs and as people who are, dealing with it in our own lives and the lives of those that we love for a long, long time. But we finally found a medical oncologist who can talk to us a little bit about this and also tell us about some of the good news stories, because there are actually treatment options and clinical trials that are going on at the moment that are very, very interesting and quite hopeful. So I'm really pleased that we can bring Dr. Ronwyn Van Eeden on this morning to talk about immunotherapy, chemotherapy, clinical trials, and all kinds of other stuff. Answer a few of these questions. I know Ryan sent me a few questions that he has as well. I'd like to know what you think, and also you can throw comments into the comment section this morning. We will be pleased to put those to Ronwyn as well. But Ronwyn, what a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Good morning, Gareth. Nice to be here.
Morning,
Nice to have you on. And Lebang and I are really pleased to be able to ask you a bunch of these questions, but just tell us a little bit about you before we get going straight into the subject matter. Well, how long have you been in practice and how did you get involved in oncology, and tell us about all of that?
So I'm a medical oncologist in private practice in Rosebank. I also have an honorary consultant post at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, where I help out occasionally, and I've been in private practice probably for about 8 years now. And I always say, you don't always decide to be an oncologist one day. People often ask me why I would do such a dreary job. I kind of say it chose me in a way. But it's actually an amazing field with, like you said, a lot of new advancements and therapies. There's always something new. So it's a very rewarding and a very wonderful speciality, actually.
Well, I don't think it's boring at all, but it must be quite emotionally and physically draining sometimes.
Draining.
You deal with people who really feel a lot of the time that they're getting the worst news it's possible to get. There are people who walk in and they go, oh, doctor, I'm going for a regular checkup. The doctor says, oh, we're going to need to do a little biopsy on this or that, or we need to check that out. And then they come back with this terrible news. And it used to be that was a death sentence. If it was only a matter of time once you had some kind of cancer. And this is not so long ago, right, Ronwyn? I mean, not so long ago, if you got any type of cancer, it was tickets. It was just a question of how much time you had. And we have developed all kinds of technologies that and treatments that have made life not only prolonged and have given people healthy lives, but in many cases, we've been able to completely reduce the effects of many of these cancers. There are obviously some that are still much, much harder to treat than others. But where would you say we are at the moment?
Just to go on your first point, it is a very emotional, very huge journey for a lot of people. And I think also as an oncologist, you walk a very long road with the patient. So it's not just like a surgeon where you do a biopsy or you do an operation, it's done. You kind of spend many, many years with these patients and you go through all their struggles, all their journeys with them. And that's the thing about oncology nowadays, is that it's kind of become more like a chronic disease in a way because of all the advancements in therapies. Whereas before, and I always use lung cancer as an example, it's still the leading cause of cancer death. But before, if you were diagnosed with lung cancer, people would say, I'm sorry, you've only got a couple of months to live. But nowadays we have really impressive survival statistics for patients with lung cancer, and they often live for many, many years. For instance, with lung cancers these days, we've got a lot of advancements in technology. What we do with the tumor types is that once it's diagnosed, we run a lot of diagnostics on it. We use lots of special stains, lots of testing on them. We do special biomarkers for prediction for newer therapies like immunotherapy. We also do stuff like next generation sequencing, where we sequence the tumor, we look at the different mutations or the abnormalities that causes the driver or the gene behind the cancer which causes it to grow. And with that information, we can actually find things like targeted therapies for patients, which are often sometimes tablets that they can take chronically. And this not only makes the ease of coming for treatment a lot easier, but also impacts greatly on the quality of life, the toxicities, less side effects. So it's really impressive what we can do these days. I'm not saying we don't use chemotherapy at all anymore. Chemotherapy is still a big part of our armamentarium that we use for treatments. But yeah, there's a lot of newer things, a lot of newer technologies, and where we saw people living for 1 year before, I've got some lung cancer patients that have lived for 5 years even.
That's
all right. So you said lung cancer is the most common. I mean, what are the best and worst, in inverted commas, cancers to get? Because we all do know someone who's got it in one shape or form. Which organs are the most critically affected and that we have the least effective treatments for, and which ones are far less aggressive? Or is it a question also of individual people and how well they respond to these treatments? Where do we measure these things? How are we able to get a grip on what kind of cancer we've got, what the prognosis is for those people who have it?
So lung cancer, not the most common, but the leading cause of cancer deaths. The most common cancers for females, for instance, is breast cancer by far. And then in males, obviously prostate cancer. And then the other more common cancers that we see is things like colorectal cancers, and also GIT cancers like gastric cancers and those kinds. In terms of prognosis-wise, it always depends on the stage of the cancer. Obviously, the earlier the stage of the cancer, the better the prognosis. So that's why we're always advocating for screening and checks and doing annual mammograms, pap smears, prostate checks once you're over the age of 50, doing colonoscopies, gastroscopies. So really advocating for screening, because if we do detect cancers earlier, prognostically, you'll do a lot better and you'll live a lot longer. Obviously, and the sad part of things, and especially what we see in government or state hospitals versus private practice, where people have more access to screening and better access to healthcare, is that patients often present quite late with their cancers. And obviously, when it's spread or when it's a stage 4 cancer, prognostically, you'll do a lot worse. Saying that, with stage 4 cancers, because we have, and especially also even with breast cancer therapy, we've got a lot of newer drugs, targeted therapies, therapies that don't just involve chemotherapy, that actually, prolong, the patient's life a lot longer. So yeah, it's not as dismal as it was before. But so if I can say what's important is screening, mammograms, also prostate checks, scopes, those kind of things, and really just for people to be aware and not to ignore things. So a lot of the times you'll see something small or a little lump on your body and just kind of be like, oh, it's just there, and I'll see if it goes away. It's actually to proactively out and check everything, and the earlier you get it, the better you'll do.
all right, let's talk about those tests. What kind of thing would Lebang have to do? What kind of thing would I have to do as, people in Lebang's case in their 30s and in my case in their 40s? We want to be as careful as possible, but we don't want to be going for tests every other week, become paranoid about every single thing that we think needs testing. So should you on an annual basis be doing a test? Should it be every 2 years? Should it be every 6 months? Like, what would you advocate as being responsible and sensible here? Because you can't be going off to the doctor every time you think there's something going on.
So the guidelines are different for different parts of the country or different parts of the world. In general, in my own practice, what I see is actually a lot of younger people being diagnosed with cancers. So I think we've also got a misconstrued concept that, cancer's for an older person, that only old ladies get breast cancers. But actually the general population that we're seeing in the practice is that younger patients are getting colorectal cancers, so in their 40s. And then also for breast cancers, I have patients in their late 20s, early 30s. So I hear what you're saying about not running off and checking everything, but I think we also have in our minds that when we're young and we have a breast lump that it can't possibly be cancer, but I think it's always just to check. So guidelines advocate for women for breast cancer screening to start doing mammograms from the age of 40. I think if you've got a strong family history, sometimes you can even start sooner with that. And for men, prostate checks from about the age of 50. And for colonoscopies, colorectal screening from the age of 50. But as I mentioned before, we're seeing a lot of younger patients in their 40s, even in their late 30s, being diagnosed with it as well. So the bottom line is, you don't need to run around and check everything and be completely paranoid about everything. But if you have a sense that something's wrong, is to rather just check it.
Yeah. Doc, let's talk about the costs of all of these things. I mean, it off the bat, obviously it would be expensive to get any of this treatment, but just like as you say, you've got the Rosebank clinic where you work, and you also have an eye on what's happening in Soweto. So what are some of the differences that you're seeing with regard to access to this? Because when my mom had breast cancer and we had to go watch her do this chemo thing, it was a very drooling experience. It was fun. It was so bloody expensive, and I have to just be honest about that. And I just said to myself, how can anybody afford any of this? And this is your life. So you're going to do whatever you need to do to get the help that you need in that moment. But if I am from the townships and I've been diagnosed with cancer, can I rely on a hospital like Bara to really get me out of that?
So the first thing I want to say about South Africa and the inequality in the healthcare, it is massive. I mean, what you can get in public versus what you get in private is chalk and cheese. I'm not saying that there's no treatment in public, but it's extremely more difficult. It's much harder to get access. And also just in terms of just comfort and just what you are exposed to, it's a lot harder. Also, where the problem comes in the public versus the private sector is that what we have available in public is very limited as well. So obviously, it's only prescribed minimum benefit type of therapies, chemotherapy. So you're going to get access to things like immunotherapy and targeted therapies in public, unless, of course, you can enroll in a clinical trial. So what's nice is that they do have clinical trials available to patients in public. And then obviously in the private sector, how it works is that if you're on a medical aid, for instance, you'll have a benefit for cancer or a benefit for oncology, which we use the therapies and the funds for. Saying that, it's also very unequal. A lot of patients think because they have a medical aid, they'll be able to get any therapies, but that's also not true. There's different schemes, different levels on your medical aid. And if you're on a very, very low tier or low option on your medical aid, what you get then is also very minimal and very, very few options. Whereas if you're on a very high scheme or high tier, you'll get options to more things. And even then, when we have our newer therapies like immunotherapies and targeted therapies, they never really pay for. Always have a co-payment, and these can be very large as well. So we do also try to get patients on trials, especially where we have therapies like melanoma or lung cancer, for instance, or gastric cancer, where we do need access to better drugs. But that's also difficult because it's very strict and stringent criteria to get into trials, and you really have to tick every single box to be able to do that as well. So yes, it's frustrating in a lot of ways because I worked in public initially, and when I got to private practice, I thought, oh, I'm going to practice first world medicine and I'll be able to give all the treatments I want to. But what we find every day is that we try to get things for patients. We are limited by funds. We are limited by access. So it's a struggle.
Just let me cut to the chase for a lot of people. It comes down to chemotherapy and immunotherapy, as you were saying. There are lots of new developments there, but chemotherapy is that what it always was? You know, it used to be this hugely invasive and very, very frightening, very painful, very I would say traumatic experience for whoever suffered, and it was large doses of radiation, and people lost their hair and they felt absolutely horrific for a week or two afterwards. Is it always still like that, or has the treatment become much more localized? Have we become better at dealing with these tumors or with these cancers in specific places? How far have we developed since the days when chemotherapy was just kind of something to keep you going for an extra few weeks?
So I always say to patients when they ask me about chemo, I'm like, it's not like it is in the movies, like where you see people lying on the floor, collapse, can't walk, can't move. Obviously, there are a lot of developments in the chemotherapy side. We use specific types of drugs for specific type of cancers. But I think what's also changed over the years is that also our supportive therapies that we have for patients with chemo have improved a lot. So there's a lot of new antiemetics or anti-nausea drugs that we use that control nausea and vomiting a lot better. And also in terms of radiation and radiotherapy, it's not in the old days where they kind of just fried your whole chest or fried your whole body. The machines are very, very advanced in technology. They can work out very specific volumes and contouring and specific areas that they can radiate. So that really decreases the toxicity a lot. Also, there are certain chemotherapies that don't cause alopecia or don't cause hair loss, for instance. So in terms of side effects, those can be very well managed, also in a very good team that has a lot of support for you. So it's really not as crazy or as hectic as it was back in the day. And I think a lot of people have that conception when they come to you and you tell them that they need chemotherapy, that's just going to be like an absolute nightmare and they're going to be sick. What the therapies we have now and the supportive meds we have now really can improve the experience and improve the journey for the patients as well.
Lebang, you're on mute.
I'm talking to myself here. Doc, what are some of the things that one can do to almost try their best to prevent ever potentially being diagnosed with cancer? I mean, for some of us, it's hereditary apparently. So my mom had cancer, so I'm screwed. I need to start checking my boobs every 2 years, whatever, sharp. But what are the things, obviously, as you said, it's not like in the movies. In the movies, they tell us, oh, if you keep smoking, you'll get lung cancer. Like really day-to-day things, my diet, is it really all related to how often I'm, going to the gym, all those kinds of things. Like from your experience, what can I take away with me today that will make me say, let me start implementing so that I can prevent it from possibly ever happening?
Yes, I think with cancer, we usually say there's modifiable risks and non-modifiable risks. So things that you can do to help yourself, but there's also a lot of things that you can't do or can't prevent, for instance, genetics or family history, those kind of things. So, for instance, if you carry a predisposing gene for cancer, that's not something you can help or prevent. But definitely lifestyle does improve or decrease your risks for cancers. A healthy diet that's high in fiber, fruits, vegetables, low in processed foods, not smoking, not having a lot of alcohol, being active, not having a sedentary lifestyle. Those all have been proven to contribute in a big way to cancer prevention. So yes, the healthier you are and the more you exercise, the more you look after your body, that definitely does decrease your cancer risk significantly. Saying that, I think life is always hard and we have to be realistic. I have some patients that are marathon runners, some patients that are really do everything right and they still get cancer. So I don't want to say it's like luck of the draw, but sometimes it's very heart-wrenching when you've done everything right and you still get diagnosed. So I think also to be aware that even though you're like the healthiest and the most active person, to still be like aware of your body, be mindful, check things if it's necessary. But yeah, definitely not smoking, not drinking a lot, not eating processed foods. Those do contribute in a huge way to cancer prevention or decreasing your risk of developing cancer.
All right, let's talk about immunotherapy for a second, because that's very different to chemotherapy, which you kind of covered for us already. So immunotherapy is a wide array of treatments that are now available, and they're consistently coming up with new and creative ways of effectively beating cancer. And let's just be clear, Lebang, cancer, and Doc, correct me where I'm wrong here. Cancer is your own body. It's your own body mutating in a very kind of a very specific way in order to produce cells that your own body then turns against with its immune system. So we need to find ways of identifying those and removing them before your body starts to turn on itself and do a huge amount of damage. I mean, that's a very simplified way of putting it, right, Doctor?
I think it's actually a good way to put it. So essentially how cancer develops is that in your body, it's like your cells are driving along a road and there's an accelerator and there's a brake. And if your accelerator gets stuck, your cells grow very fast and it develops a cancer. Or if your brakes fail on you and you can't stop, your cells from, not growing, then in that way, we call it oncodrivers or oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes.
Right.
How immunotherapy works essentially is a lot different from chemo. How chemotherapy works is that it kills the cancer cells directly, and that's why you get the other side effects from chemo, because it works on fast-growing cells. So, for instance, your hair is a high turnover cell, or your nails, for instance. So that's why you can have changes in your nails, your hair falling out. Immunotherapy essentially works by in your body, there's an on and off switch for your immune system. It blocks your off switch so that your immune system's constantly turned on. And how that works then is that your actual immune system fights the cancer. At the moment, there are over between 10 and 15 new indications for different cancer types for using immunotherapy. So in South Africa, we've got indications for immunotherapy in breast cancer, specifically triple negative, Hodgkin's lymphoma, colorectal cancer, lung cancer, gastric cancer, renal cell carcinoma. There's like a long list of different treatments that we can use immunotherapy for. The thing with immunotherapy is, and melanoma as well, with immunotherapy, if it works, it can be really, really amazing. But I also want to get the message out there that it's not the holy grail and it's not the solution to everybody's cancer and everybody's problem. So you can use immunotherapy for certain types of cancers and certain types of patients, and it won't always work. But when it does work, you can get really good results. And then obviously the kicker for immunotherapy is that it's hellishly expensive. So we always try to advocate to try to get patients on a clinical trial. Otherwise, immunotherapy without support or without having a lot of money, it's very difficult to sustain, because unlike with chemo, you kind of plan to do 6 treatments and then that's the end of it. Immunotherapy is often ongoing, where we use the drug for often a year or 2 at a time, or we use it until it stops working. So it's a long duration of treatment that we're looking at. There are certain foundations also that help patients to pay for their co-payments with immunotherapy, for instance, that we can apply for help for assistance in finance. But by large, it's very inaccessible and very expensive, unless you are, on the little minority of patients in South Africa, which is probably less than 2%, who have an amazing medical aid and a lot of money.
Well, before we get into like that tiny 2%, because really I think those people are kind of they'll be looked after. The rest of us, obviously, you mentioned this already. There are obviously some ways that you can still maintain and deal with this stuff, but there are other ways that are just huge amounts of expense, regardless, huge amounts of money, rather, regardless. Tell us about the idea of diet. I mean, we often talk about how smoking obviously is really bad for your lungs. We talk about how drinking is bad for your liver. We talk about how, skin cancer you can get by being in the sun too long or by exposing yourself to harmful radiation, all that kind of stuff. But diet is a hugely important part of this. And we're discovering more and more, Doctor, that diet plays a hugely important and influential role on your overall health. If you're eating terrible stuff, it's just as bad as smoking and drinking and doing all the other bad things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I just asked this.
Hey?
Sorry?
No, I'm just saying, like, I just asked this question, but it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, we did
sorry.
already. So
we covered this one.
I thought you were asking about drink, Lebang. That's just that's kind of how little attention I've been paying to you, because I just assumed you'd be talking about drink. Okay, no, then ignore me. I'm so sorry.
One thing I can say about smoking. No, one thing I can say about smoking is a lot of patients will say to me, for instance, I have lung cancer anyway. Like, why can't I just carry on smoking? Like, it makes no difference. So, but I also want to say that even when you've been diagnosed with the cancer, like, because I think we spoke a lot about cancer prevention, but also when you've been diagnosed with the cancer, it's also important then to modify your life as well. So a lot of the study shows if you carry on smoking while we're trying to treat your lung cancer or trying to do your therapies, that it does have a negative impact. So also just to say that once we start treatment and those kind of things, that continuing with being healthy and modifying your life is important as well. But yes, we did touch on it before.
Well, instead of me covering territory that's already been covered, here's Congo Chris with a good question. Is it true that pancreatic cancer is sometimes the precursor for diabetes? And what would the symptoms be to watch out for there?
So yes, when you do have a mass in your pancreas, or if you have a problem with your pancreas, it can cause problems like diabetes, because obviously your pancreas is responsible for that function. Pancreas cancer is a difficult one because most of the time, if I can say that almost all of my patients that I see with the pancreas cancer present very advanced and very late. Your pancreas is unfortunately an organ that sits quite far back in your abdomen. So, to get symptoms very early on is unusual. So you only really pick up symptoms when it's very huge or very advanced, or when it's spread already. Literally, I have 2 patients only with a early stage pancreas cancer, and that was found accidentally while we were scanning for other things. Signs for diabetes would obviously be things like being very thirsty, or urinating a lot, or sometimes you can present with recurrent infections or high sugars, where you can present to hospital with confusion. So it's very difficult. Pancreas cancer doesn't have a lot of warning signs, and I would say probably 90% of the time it will only present when it's too advanced to do anything about.
Oh my God! All right, so that's definitely one you don't want.
Yeah.
No, you don't. It's got a very not a great prognosis and not good outcomes. In terms of the strides, the advancements we've made with pancreas cancer is not as impressive as breast cancer and like renal cell and prostate even cancer, and the more common types of cancers. We've done a lot more in terms of therapies and have a lot more available in terms of those cancers. Pancreas, unfortunately, is still one of those cancers that we struggle with, that we don't see patients survive very well. The latest things with pancreas cancers, for instance, is that we're also looking at using a targeted therapy called a PARP inhibitor, which if you've got an inheritary type of pancreas cancer with the BRCA gene, for instance, that we can use a specific kind of therapy for that. So I don't know if it covers that in a nutshell.
Well, I mean, that's a more comprehensive answer than anyone else has given us. Go ahead, Lebang.
How far are we with the cure? I mean, I know this question probably gets asked all the time. I know there's been conspiracy theories about the cure has been around. They just don't want to give it to us because the medical industry is so, it's $1 billion industry, and if blah, 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 there's a lot.
Right.
But real talk is running the show.
I think we're losing Lebang there.
Yeah.
She seems to be breaking up quite badly. I think her question, though, is a good one. Like, where are we with the cure that everybody's been talking about for ages? Are we getting any closer to that? Is there a miracle on the horizon?
So I'd like to say, in terms of curing cancer, is that we do cure a lot of cancers. So like I said earlier, if you have a very early stage cancer, or it presents in a stage 1, a stage 2, even a stage 3, we still have potential to cure those cancers, which is why I was advocating earlier in the show for early screening and doing early checkups. In terms of curing for stage 4 cancers, or cancers that have spread already, we actually have seen progress in that, whereas people who have stage 4 cancers are being cured with our newer therapies or our newer advancements in treatments. Also, stage 4 has very different, or cancers that have spread have very different connotations these days. We look at patients that have something called oligometastatic disease, where if you have just 1 or 2 spots that have spread, we can do targeted therapies for those areas, or we can even cut out those areas or radiate those areas, and then give other types of treatment that then can convert someone from incurable to curable. So I think there's so much more research being done, and there's so many newer therapies that if you do choose the right patient and choose the correct treatments, that we do actually still manage to cure quite a lot of people. In terms of finding a magic bullet where we kind of just zap a person with any cancer that they have and just cure them, I think that I don't know if we'll see that in this lifetime. But yeah, there's been a lot of change and a lot of new things. And yeah, and if the message you were trying to get out today, Gareth, is that, cancer is not like it was in the older days where if you have cancer, that's the end of you. That's really not the case. There's really so much more we can do these days, so much more information we can get about the cancer. So when we look at a person's cancer, it's not just this is breast. We have about 20 different versions of a breast cancer, or 20 different ways we can look at it and profile that cancer, and actually do what we call precision medicine or precision oncology, where we really hone in on what that specific problem is with the individual's cancer and treat them in a very specific and a unique and an individual way.
Well, that's kind of the real agenda of having you on, was to not depress people about talking about cancer. It's not something anybody wakes up in the morning and wants to talk about. It's what you happen to do as a job every day. Thank God for people like you doing it. But the real reason to have you on was to also explain that there is an enormous amount of development and application and research and scientific advancement that's going on here, and that we're able to deal with these things, and it doesn't have to be the bad, sad, terrible death sentence that it used to be. There are obviously new and exciting ways for this to be developing, and we need to keep on top of those things, which is why I'm thrilled to have you on. So Dr. Ronwyn Van Eeden, thank you so much for being with us this morning. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Gareth. And yes, so I'm so happy that you put a positive spin on that. Everybody hates coming to see me. Oh my gosh, do I have to see an oncologist? It's the worst thing. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a horrible journey. I think that if we really listen to patients, treat them as individuals, and care about them in that way, that we can make huge progress and actually make the whole cancer experience not a bad one at all.
I'm thrilled you're doing the job that you do, and thank you for being on the show. Thanks, Dr. Ronwyn Van Eeden. Very, very good. That's pretty much a wrap from us this morning. But before we go, we did we did do a poll. Should Gord be allowed back on the show after missing yesterday? And 68% of people said, sure, no problem. 11% said, no, not at all. So only 11%, I'm afraid you guys lose. And 22% said, who the hell's Gord? Which is even funnier. But definitely a sizable majority, more than 2/3 of people saying he should come back. So fine, you win. We'll get him back on at some point. Anyway, everybody, have a happy Tuesday. We will see you tomorrow, bright and early at 6 a.m. Be good. Cheers.